True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. We have a great show tonight. We're going to be discussing Nancy Guthrie, who disappeared on, well, I shouldn't say disappeared, who was forcefully abducted on February 1st. We have such a great crew. I want to get everybody introduced and welcome them to the stage because I don't want to waste a lot of time on jabber. I want to get straight down to facts, straight down to business, and straight down to a lot of questions. I'm going to be joined, first of all, by my co-moderator, who is Drunk Turkey. I love to say that name, otherwise known as Daniel, the DT Show. And he's going to join me on stage. We're going to have the questions we're going to be asking our panelists. We have Dale Lundberg, former homicide detective with the Dallas Police Department. We have New York homicide detector and major crimes detective Tom Smith. We're going to have Mac McCullum. She will be coming up, but just a little bit late. We have Monica, who is our newest friend of the show. I did a STS show with her, and she was just amazing. She's a defense investigator coming in after the fact and sort of looking things. And I thought she would just add a very interesting perspective on some of the things she would be looking at in this. We have Philip Dubé, who is our resident defense attorney / prosecutor. He was in the public defender's office for years in Los Angeles. So it just doesn't really get any better than this crew. And I really want to thank everybody for coming up. So here we go. Let's get you all on the stage. Our stage is going to be very full. And guys, I apologize. For some reason, these banners aren't coming up to the audience, but I think you will recognize a lot of the faces here. So without further ado, Daniel, go ahead and start us off.
Hey, everybody. Well, just to kind of get right into it. My first question is going to be for the detectives. I'm going to start off with you, Dale. When you have
Can anyone hear Daniel? Because I can't.
Can you hear me?
I can't.
I do.
All right. Well, I guess my question might be then kind of transitioning if you can't hear me.
Wait a minute. Who can hear him? Just not Dale? Philip, can you hear him?
Just say testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, I can hear him.
I can't hear him.
And Dale, you can't. There might be something wrong. Dale, you'll still be able to hear, at least me. I'm going to take you off the stage, so maybe you can ask if you have any help to see what might be wrong with your device.
Well, it's odd because I can hear everybody else.
Everybody but Daniel. Wow. Well, let's get started. Daniel, you just won't be able to ask Dale any questions.
Well, maybe perhaps somebody can relay the question to him. But my first question is going to be for the detectives, and then transitioning also to the attorneys on the show is, how does a celebrity impact this case, where you have the daughter, the daughter is a celebrity, Savannah Guthrie, co-host of the Today Show, and does that limit the information that you put out, knowing how much eyes are on this? And then from an attorney standpoint, if you're the defense attorney and somebody gets arrested, does this help or hurt your case? Can you get out more information that you want out into the public through the media due to the fact of the attention that it's garnishing? We'll start off with the detectives.
Yeah, when you're dealing with a celebrity, there's a couple of challenges with that. One, the detectives who are involved in this and the supervisors and everyone else cannot get wrapped up in who it is. You have to just stay focused, as hard as that is. You have to just stay focused about what the crime is in your investigation, and let the part of the department, public information, or whoever it might be, deal with that aspect of it. But you can't get off track of making it, all right, I'm going to do this because it's this person. You're not going to get involved in that. You're just going to stick to your job and what you do and take it like it's every other crime. Not to diminish what the crime is, but you have to just look at it like another case, and then let the powers that be deal with, who the celebrity is or the information that gets out there. Every investigation is going to have a certain level of I don't want to say secrecy, but sensitivity that's going to go out there because of investigative steps that have to be taken and have to be held close. So you're not putting too much information out there. And then again, that leads to dealing with it like every other case and not being so wrapped up in who the particular family members are.
So Dale, just to let you know the question, and you probably can glean it from Tom's answer, but how does celebrity type cases affect your investigation?
Yeah, well, Tom was absolutely right. You can't let celebrity influence the way you investigate a case, because in the end, you're just looking at the evidence. You're listening to the witnesses, and you really need to try to avoid doing stuff just because of the celebrity status that's attached to somebody. Yeah, he was right. You let the Public Information Office deal with that, and you just let your supervisor know what's been done so he can communicate that to PIO and just do your job.
So I'm going to piggyback off of that question that Daniel had. And I want to know, have you ever had a situation where, and sorry, this is for the detectives again, have you ever had a situation where you had undue pressure to either in terms of time constraints or in a direction that your staff, supervisory staff, thought things should go, political pressure? Tom, I'll go to you first.
Well, one particular case that I was involved in, that it wasn't so much a celebrity, but the place where he worked, being a major newspaper outlet in New York City, and let's see if everyone can figure out who that is. You know, in a particular kidnapping case that I was doing, there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of updates and briefings and all that. But again, like both Dale and I are in conjunction with, you can't get wrapped up in that, because if you do, you're going to miss something. Something's going to be overlooked, and you're not going to do what you normally do on every case. And again, not to diminish it, but you have to look at every case the way it is. Factual evidence, who do you got, who you're looking at, and just go about it that way. But the pressures are more for, you know, the bosses. They want to be bosses. So now it's a time to be a boss and take, you know, the reins of that when it comes to sharing the information with the people who are, you know, all over your back or pressuring you to do so.
Dale, any addition to that?
No. In my career, I can say that I was actually very blessed in that all of my supervisors just let me do my job. They might come to me occasionally and ask, hey, what's going on with your case? What do you need? But that was it. They understood that we were all grown-ups in homicide, and they let us work our cases the way we knew we needed to work them.
You know, I think can be a misconception by the public, because I've seen it so often in whether it's on Twitter, on X, social media, even in these chat rooms, where people think that there is so much political pressure, and that's why cases diverge in a bad way or are slowed down, or, you know, things aren't happening. So I wanted to ask Philip about this, especially being in LA, Los Angeles, all these superstars, and I'm sure many crossed your desk. What was your experience when it came to, you know, Dan's case or Daniel's question and mine?
Well, the first thing that you always want to avoid is an impact on a future jury pool, because ultimately we got to pick our 12 to sit in the box from people who are in the vicinage that are listening to all the media accounts, reading all the social media things. And if there is some type of social media stir, you want to tamp it down so you don't hurt the client. But one of the tools that we have in our arsenal is jury selection. And as long as you can pin down 12 jurors to this idea that they have not formed a final opinion, then I don't really care about the media, frankly. Now, from a personal standpoint, it's a great career boon. I can't tell you. Ever since I started going on television, I've had countless times where people are stopping me for an autograph. I don't care if it's a restaurant, the movies, I was pumping gas. From that standpoint, it's great. And obviously it can generate business. But when you're trying to protect the legal interests of a client, you don't ever want to discuss the case, especially in the media. And the main reason why is that because discovery is ongoing, and we're always subject to getting more and more evidence, you may have to pivot and redirect and rethink your defense. And if you've committed to something, albeit by an unforced error in the media, then you could look like a buffoon during the trial. You'll look like someone who's talking out of both sides of their mouth. So you want to keep your options open until everything is in. Do you have all the terabytes of data, all the thumb drives, all the documentary discovery, everything? Otherwise, you end up hurting your client.
Really quick to get Monica in here on this same question that Daniel asked.
Now I can't hear Jennifer.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
hitting me.
Can you hear me now?
I do. I mean, I still do.
Can you all hear me except Dale?
I can hear it.
Dale, can you log out and log back in?
Dale, log out and log back in.
There we go. Oh, he can't hear anyone. Oh, boy. This happened on one of my other lives for some reason. I really don't understand why. Go ahead, Daniel, and ask a question to Monica, please, while I communicate with Dale behind the scenes.
So, Monica, good to meet you. There's been a couple of cases that I've seen that have played out in the media. The Karen Reed case is one of them where I think it may have favored her, that there was a lot of publicity about the case, and it was kind of driven in her direction. Do you see a role like that in this case once there is an offender that is arrested?
Yeah, I can. Can I answer something before I get to that? And that is to mirror Dale and Tom. We're all just fact finders. So it doesn't really matter who the victim is or who the victim's family member is or any of that. We're just merely trying to be objective and find the facts. Law enforcement, more so than when I get brought into a case, they are clearly just looking for facts and trying not to get tunnel vision and zero in on one person. So I feel like sometimes when a celebrity is involved, it actually makes things worse because it provides this overlay of pressure on law enforcement. And because all of these eyes are on them, they end up missing something, dropping the ball. And then that becomes the feature of the trial. I mean, if you go back, we're all pretty old enough to remember OJ, the sprinkling of DNA and off-color thing that Mark Furman said ended up becoming the feature of a trial, and we really lost the forest for the trees in that trial. So I just kind of wanted to add that. And so regarding the fact your question about, I kind of forgot your question now. Sorry, Dan.
No, it's okay. Just kind of like, if you're working for the defense, you're working for the defendant. Can the media, can the media be a benefit? Can you get your side of things out through the media because of the attention?
Absolutely. You can absolutely color the narrative. That is a very fine needle to thread, though. If you want to leak something to get them on a red herring to start poisoning the jury panel, you absolutely can manipulate the media. But in the same token, I learned very early on in my career by some of the best defense attorneys in the country that we didn't talk to the media. Obviously, 100 years ago when I started my career, the media wasn't, everyone's taking notes and typing, the story to make the deadline. It wasn't like this constant content. But we wouldn't say if they were chasing us. I remember a pretty significant murder trial I did in the late 1900s, and the media literally was chasing us, and we gave no comment. Because if they even ask you when you're going into the courtroom, hey, hey, how's your day going? And you go, oh, it's a pretty good day. God forbid your clients smile and say, oh, I'm having a pretty good day. They're like, oh, the serial killer is having a great day and the victim's family is over there, living the worst day of their life. The media historically was never really a friend.
No.
And so I feel that way when I'm trying to be objective in a case. I feel that cuts both ways for the government and for the defense, because I can imagine these two lead homicide detectives are like, oh, Jesus, the media is here again and, fly specking everything. So I think it cuts both ways, Daniel. I think you can manipulate it to benefit you, but I also think it could hurt you terribly.
Makes a lot of sense.
And by the way, they often misquote us. It's
Yes.
another reason why I won't
Yes.
do an interview like in the courtroom halls.
Well, I've often said the one thing that cannot be spun by the media is silence. Because if you say something as easy as, oh, we're having having a pretty good day. Oh, the defense think they're winning today.
Mhm.
So you can't. So I'm like, just if you don't say anything, they can't spin silence.
That's correct.
And that's exactly why the FBI doesn't talk.
Mhm.
And
why
that's why you get sanctioned in federal court if you open your mouth too. The federal judges really have a nice place for you if you want to talk in federal court to the media.
Daniel, next question.
So the next question, and I'll kind of gear it out to everybody again, start off with the detectives. It seems like there's not been a lot of information out there. The sheriff has kind of mentioned DNA a couple of times. At this point, Brian Koberger's DNA and he was already caught. The IgG was done. The investigators in this case had gone out to a couple of different gun shops. They had shown some pictures of people. It appears that their suspect may be of Hispanic or Mexican descent. How could, if this person isn't from the United States, not saying that's the case, but if this person isn't from the United States, can that tree be, I guess, more difficult to finish? And or, I mean, if you have to go and get somebody outside of the United States, DNA like they were trying to get in the Brian Koberger case, what kind of problems can you have? And then if you're the attorney, can you find some holes in that?
Yeah, you want to go? You want me to?
I'll let you start.
You know what? The DNA with this case, first of all, I think a dramatic mistake was made not handing it right to the FBI and bringing it to their lab. That was the biggest mistake they made with the collection of any DNA. They've been doing it forever. They're experts at it. You would have gotten a completely different outlook report from them as opposed to sending it to a lab in the middle of Florida. The only thing, to answer your question, Daniel, the genealogy would be the only other aspect of this that could help out if the DNA goes nowhere. Is someone else in that family lineage ever been arrested or given any kind of DNA sample around that could lead back to a subject? But I think, again, I'm sure we'll get into this later, the mistakes that were made right away resonate throughout this investigation. That's with any investigation. If you don't start off right, it's just going to be like a snowball effect and tidal wave, and it's just going to get so far ahead or bad, it's hard to get back.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, one, I'm really glad that the detectives haven't shared most of what they have. They shouldn't. And when it comes to the DNA, if it's somebody from out of the country and you're trying to find them in CODIS, but they're not there, and then you want to look at the genealogy sites to see if there's a partial match. I don't know a lot of people in Mexico who would use 23andMe or any of those other sites. And also, when you get into the lower socioeconomic areas, the people who live there almost never spend their money on those kind of sites. Mm-hmm. So if it's somebody from out of the country who has not been arrested here and had a sample taken, chances are very slim that you're going to get a hit with the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be square on this too. Everybody was wondering, well, why didn't the glove? And again, I'm not even clear on which glove it was. There were 16 gloves, and it wasn't specified that it was the glove that everybody was sort of talking about that went back to the restaurant owner. If anybody knows anything different than that, Daniel, if you've tracked this down, but I tracked it down, and I think the sheriff even kind of was smirking that everybody was talking about the DNA like it was related to the glove that had similar characteristics, and that it wasn't. So I don't even have any information that we have the information related to the glove with similar characteristics. And CODIS has so few, yes, it's millions, I think 27 million, something like that. That is a minuscule amount of male DNA. And many states don't give DNA on arrest. You have to be convicted. And it started late. I mean, New York is a prime example. But nevertheless, I am not holding my breath for this DNA. I'm really not. We don't even know what it is. We don't know whether it's hair, semen, saliva, a tear. We don't know at all what it is or where it was found. But they sure are talking about it, so it makes me think something. Next question, and I want to get into, kind of a little bit of the nuts and bolts. So I'm going to blast off a few of these, just one, and then we'll go to Daniel, and then I'll go back. I'm going to be blasting these off. I want to know from your eyes, and this is for the whole panel, when you look, and if you haven't seen these pictures, and I can put them up actually, but when you look at Porch Guy, what do you see here? What stood out to you when you saw this close-up picture? Just give me one or two things each. Philip, let's start with you.
Well, the first thing I see is somebody wearing what appears to be a boxing glove. And for all we know, that whoever the person is also wearing a latex glove over that hand as well. So in theory, they can be putting that boxing glove over a latex glove. So what that means is you can commit a crime and not necessarily leave behind any biological or serological evidence. What you really have then is just what appears to be some type of plastic or vinyl type material reaching through, touching, and accessing the crime scene. So I don't think it's really enough to pin down with certainty who the offender may or may not be. And it would seem to me that whoever did this is rather sophisticated and experienced enough to know the drill, that if you're going to wear this type of glove, they are genuinely concerned about leaving trace evidence behind and are going to, extra steps to avoid detection. That's what I'm seeing there.
Okay, one point on that I wanted to say is that just because you have gloves on, when he grabbed those flowers, there could have been micro tears put in there. When he's slopping around that flashlight in his mouth and slopping, saliva all over those hands and then touches something else, I think there could have been a lot of DNA in that house just because he was gloved. I think he was sloppy with the gloves. I just don't know if they gathered it. Dale, on to you. What kind of stuck out to you? And I'll put that picture back up.
Well, really, when I saw the picture, I thought about the only thing that would really be useful are the eyes and the eyebrows, because those are about the only things that you could really try to match up if you had a photograph or a known suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is pretty much covered.
Tom?
The very first thing I thought of was burglar or a home invader, not a kidnapper. Just by the way he moved, he wasn't in a rush. You're doing a kidnapping case, you're doing a kidnapping target, you're going to know beforehand what you need to cover a camera that's on the front steps. Not just kind of let me grab a bunch of leaves or a branch, and cover it. That's not what would normally be done in a kidnapping case. And that was the first thing that jumped out to me.
Monica?
I agree completely with Tom on that. I feel like this is a learn as you go episode of he's going to do a robbery, and then it's like, oh gosh, there's a camera. Let me, he's doing all the things that we would know to do from watching TV, cover our face, cover our hands. We think we're being so clever. But the thing that stuck out to me is that it appears to me, and this almost looks like one of those psychological tests. Are you seeing a tree or an elephant? But the first thing that stood out to me is that it looks like he has a mustache.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be a really easy thing I can't grow a mustache overnight, but I can definitely take one off. And so I would be wanting to, if I had a family member that shaved their mustache immediately, I'd be like, what are you doing that for? So like I said, I don't even know if that really is a mustache. I'm old and my eyes are bad, but that looks like like an identifier to me as maybe even Philip's putting his glasses on now because his eyes are bad too.
I thought it was a mustache, and there was one thing that you guys didn't say, so I just wanted to, obviously I think there's a ring underneath that glove. And then the other thing is his right eye strays to me a little bit in toward the nose compared to the other that looks dead on. And if you compare it to a lot of different people, as they obviously online, everybody's comparing all these eyes. I think he has a little eye that goes in. I'm very familiar with this because I have the same problem. So one of my eyes fades in just a little bit, and I found that interesting. See how that eyeball goes in? Yes. That's something that I noticed. I could be wrong. Maybe it's the lighting, but that's what I noticed. Daniel?
By the way, if I can just piggyback off of that, I am so sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
please.
Even though we might not have the DNA capability abroad for purposes of making a match, something that we do have internationally is facial recognition. They have physiognomy databases that are accessible through Interpol. So what that means is if there is a migrant suspect who is in or at that home with a rap sheet in another country, they take mugshots. They take booking photos, and it's very possible that they have run these images internationally through the physiognomy databases to see if there's a hit. And you can bet that there's a lot of work being done in silence right now behind the scenes that has not been made public. They are not going to alert the media every time they're onto something or every time they get a lead. But you can bet that those facial features, those facial images are being run internationally.
Nor should they. I agree with Daniel. I don't think law enforcement needs to run to the podium every time they have an idea. I think that is counterproductive to solve this crime. And, unfortunately, I think we live in a space now where everything is instant, and we just think we're entitled to that. Right. And I don't think that's really fair to law enforcement.
And you know what I think the problem is with that, unlike the defense bar as an attorney, or certainly with judges, is that most of these law enforcement department heads, like for local police, state police, even federal, right, Jen? Many of them at the state and local level are elected. So as elected officials, they feel that they are accountable to the body politic about everything that's going on in a media case. And it seems to me that if they're doing that, they're more concerned about their own hide than they are about solving the crime. So they need to be very, very careful. There's a fine line, and it's a delicate balance between solving crime and being liked by voters. But you have to do whatever you can in the name of justice to do things sort of on the up and up, but without showing your hand.
Yep. The other hurdle in that is just lack of experience.
Lack of experience, exactly. Yeah.
Daniel?
For me, what I noticed in that picture, I noticed that, everything that everybody said, but to me, the glove looks more like a cloth glove underneath a latex glove. To me, that was kind of a sign of experience. Somebody that's worked with gloves, knowing that they're going to sweat. Wearing the cloth glove underneath kind of not necessarily limits that, but it soaks it up a lot more. The light is in his mouth is kind of common with like auto burglars. And to me, I didn't think this is the first time this guy made entry into a house. The get up and stuff like that. To me, he almost. I don't think he's a what's the word? I don't think he's a stupid. I don't think he's as idiotic as a lot of people were thinking. They made a lot of dumb mistakes. I think he purposely wanted to be seen. I think this is somewhat fantasy. The get up kind of reminded me of the Zodiac and what he would put on, the mask and hood. I mean, he didn't have the symbol on his chest like the Zodiac did, but he did that in efforts to create fear. And I thought that the way he walked up with the gun positioned in his crotch in the direction that he's walking, if he was an idiot, I think he would have gotten caught by now. At this point, he hasn't. And so I think he wanted to be seen when I saw this. I think there's a good chance, and I know you had a picture of the backpack, but, if he has a jammer and like some sort of Wi-Fi jammer that's going to, have an effect on that doorbell camera, why isn't it having an effect here? Probably because he wants to be seen. And, maybe perhaps his objection is Savannah Guthrie. And, well, Savannah's seen him. So is the rest of the world. And so that's kind of where I was kind of leaning towards on that when I saw his get up, is that this guy wanted to instill fear. Maybe for ransom, maybe for, fantasy driven, maybe because he wanted Savannah's attention. I don't know.
Daniel, do you have the next question for us?
Well, my question for the detectives is, if he had a jammer on, and that's the reason why, because I know there's been some articles out there that there isn't any footage from the backyard side view or anything like that. If he had a jammer on and he's walking up there intentionally with it off to be seen, what does that tell you about the type of offender that we have?
Well, I think if he wanted to walk up there with a jammer but not use it, then why even bother having it if he wants to be seen?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, the initial approach, he wanted to cover up the, I don't know what's in there. I've seen a couple of videos of some folks with jammers, and they have a pretty full backpack, very similar to that, and an antenna sticking out of his back, out of his jacket there. Does kind of sound similar to that, but you're right. Why not have it on?
Right.
Anybody else, since we're on jammers, that was going to be one of my questions. So thanks for asking that, Daniel. I'd love to hear from Tom on this. If you think this is the picture that everybody's talking about. I didn't circle it the best, to be honest with you, and there's two pictures, one that has where you can see it more in black and white, and I've got this one circled right over top, but there's basically this little antenna sticking out there. I have my thoughts on it. I'd love to get yours, Tom.
Well, I'll go in one direction. Maybe he thought it was working. If it's in his pocket, and he activates it maybe in the car or before he's walking out, maybe he didn't turn it on the right way and just always thought it was on, and that's why he was taking his time, not really paying that much attention to the camera because he thought his device was working. And then, maybe something prompted him to went, oh, maybe not, and then tried to cover the camera up. But, the indications are, the reason I say that is because of just his whole approach to the door is not in a rush. And, again, not being prepared to do what you want to do to the camera. Again, if you have a jammer, you think it's not going to be on, so that's why I think his approach was the way it was.
Well, let me ask you, and maybe law enforcement will know this. I don't mean to sound like one of the moderators here, but if he did have a jammer, I'm assuming that there is some type of IP address or other type of identifier that would be tied to it that could somehow be picked up on maybe a geofence warrant. Wouldn't that device itself be pinging somewhere?
So, of course, I don't think this was a jammer. This is what a jammer does to an image. And all we know is that one neighbor said they lost camera footage for a night. There's just no information that this is a jammer. Jammers deal with the signals of not only Wi-Fi that could have to do with this camera, but also with her pacemaker. And we know the pacemaker connected the whole time until 2:28. So it makes no sense to me that if all that was jammed, that it didn't jam. And we don't have any pictures like this. Dale, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are more than likely the antenna that you're seeing is to a handy talkie.
Yes.
Yeah, because if they would have checked the area for cell devices that were in the area, most bad guys know that, okay, that's one of the things they're going to be checking for, especially in a high profile case like this. So more than likely they came prepared with a couple of handy talkies, and that's what you're seeing the antenna to.
And you know what, Dale, just to piggyback off you, to throw another kind of question at everyone, I never thought he was alone. You know, we're seeing one guy, you know, on this camera, and I'll never ever from day one thought he was alone. So the walkie-talkie makes sense.
I agree.
Totally agree. Now, you know who wouldn't agree if she was here is Mac. Mac definitely thinks this is a lone perpetrator. She really believes that that's the case. So hopefully she'll be coming on soon and she can give her POV on this. But when I found that picture, I'm telling you, it was like an epiphany moment for me. I said, "Oh my gosh, there's another person that's involved in this deal."
You know, I'm not so much on board that there's multiple people. I think there's 1.2 million reasons for somebody to speak up, you know, especially if there's, you know, when you have multiple people that are involved, there's the possibility of one of those persons saying something to the wrong person. And given the amount of time that has gone by, I mean, maybe perhaps, but I've been kind of leery about that myself, as far as there being more than one person involved. But the backpack being full, entering a building with a full backpack, that's the one that gets me. Just kind of can't, you know, everything I think of just kind of really screams out nefariousness. I know that they were looking for, so there was another channel that did that met out with Carlos, and I'll ask you guys this. They, the detectives, they met up with Carlos. Carlos actually handed over the search warrant, and in the search warrant, they were looking for restraints and possibly some of Nancy's medications. To me, law enforcement has been indicating that they believe this was a targeted abduction from the get-go. If the perpetrator took the medications with him, I think that's a pretty big sign. You know, you don't go in there. Let's just say it was a burglary gone wrong. Something happens. You don't, you know, take her because she can identify you or she scratches you, and then go back for her medications. You know, for the detectives, what does that tell you, that if that is true, that he may have taken the medications for Ms. Guthrie? What does that say to you about the perpetrator?
Okay,
And
if you don't mind, I'll jump in on this.
Oh no, go ahead, Dale.
Okay, one, I never thought that this was a burglary.
Never.
I worked over 20 years just in patrol. I worked most of my patrol career on deep nights, and not once did I ever work a burglary of a habitation that occurred at night. I worked a lot of burglaries that happened at night, but those were all businesses. And anything that resembled a burglary that happened at a residence, the charge was burglary, but the intent was not to commit a theft, but to commit some kind of assault or abduction. And so the fact that you have a person going to a residence at night tells me that more than likely, and you have to say more than likely because we don't know, you know, the perpetrator, and he hasn't told us why he or they were doing what they did. But based on my experience, that shows to me that their intent was not to commit any kind of theft offense. If they thought the house was vacant, that's different, but I don't believe that they thought that the house was going to be vacant.
Monica?
You know, I can talk myself into being a lone wolf or multiple defendants. I can go either way on this one. Initially, my initial, and I'm not as well read on the subject as you guys, but my initial thing was it was a robbery, and surprise, there's an old lady there. She falls down, gets hurt, and now it's like, oh my gosh, I never thought it was initially like an intentional kidnapping. I just thought it was like, a lot of times in my line of work, I see it from a different angle, and I think Tom and Dale will agree. We give the defendants a lot of credit that there's this great plan, when in fact they're just screw ups and everything goes wrong. It's supposed to be a simple robbery, and then they fall over the box fan, wake up the people. The next thing you know, 2 people are dead. It never was intended to go that far, and that's how I initially looked at this case. Like, oh gosh, he goes in to rob the joint, and now there's an old woman. I don't know on what planet anybody wants to kidnap an 84-year-old woman. It's like trying to kidnap a bag of cats. Mm-hmm. They're infirmed. They're hard to transport. They're medically unstable. You have to have medicine, unless the intent was to kill her from day one, which is a horrible thing to say. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to the Guthries, but I just think kidnapping an older woman is, you don't know how long it's going to take to get the ransom. And when is somebody going to figure out she's gone? This is not a young mother that has just dropped her children off at school and doesn't come back to pick them up. This is a woman that's living independently in a pretty nice house in the middle of nowhere. So those were just my initial reactions.
I will say that I have worked murders and aggravated assaults that were classified as burglaries, where a burglar broke into a house, found somebody home, and ended up killing them or beating them severely. But in every one of those instances, that was during the daytime when they were breaking into a house that they believed was going to be vacant.
Right. I agree.
And take them. I mean, I can't think of a case where you take them. I found one case where they took them, but that's because they weren't masked. So they took them and shot them in the back of the head. An 80-year-old woman in South Carolina, a very recent case.
Yep, I agree with everyone. The only thing that gives me pause about the kidnapping part, I don't think it was their initial thought. Because if you're going into a situation of a targeted kidnapping, you would somewhat have a plan that the target has to mean something and has to have a value. That's why you're taking them. So you would have it set up in your head of how you're going to get money. And the very first thing, as far as I thought of initially, when you're taking her, the very first phone call within an hour is going to be to NBC or to the Guthrie family. That is going to be the initial contact you're going to have, that I have, Mom, this is what I want. Kidnappers do not want their victims with them any longer than they need them to be, because it's too much for them. You have to take care of them and keep them alive, which an 84-year-old woman is very difficult to do, who's on medication and a pacemaker. Yeah. So they want to get this done as quickly as possible. That's why the time frame of these maybe ransom notes, which I never believed anyway. But I would just think if you're going to have a targeted plan of this individual, you're going to know who to contact right away.
For me, one of the things that I noticed when it came to the blood spatter on the floor was that there wasn't a handprint, and it appeared to be aspirated blood, which told me a couple of things. One, she wasn't gagged or hooded, perhaps maybe restrained, which is why that may have been written in the search warrant. But if she was bleeding from her mouth or nose, I would expect somebody to grab, and then when they lift up, pick up off the ground, but yet there's none of that there. To y'all's point, is this a possible, were they going in there with the intention of kidnapping her or not? I don't know. I would have assumed that they would have gagged her somehow, prevented her from yelling. But then, the whole restraint aspect of it does make it seem like that may have been the intention. What do y'all think about the blood spatter? What kind of story does that tell you guys?
Go ahead, Dale, because you and I agree on this.
Yeah, I believe that those are just blood droplets that hit the ground from a stationary person, and that's all you're seeing. I believe that who was ever bleeding, probably Nancy Guthrie, was held there long enough for her to have those droplets fall off her body and hit the ground.
You're just going to not leave there with her ungagged, unhooded. She's going to see the car. She could scream. I think that's what was in that backpack, something to hood her, something, everything to restrain her, to gag her. And I wanted to show that picture again. So this is a picture of the droplets. This is the spot that people think are gagged. But I think all of us agree we're not blood spatter scientists or anything, but just
I've had one on my channel. I had a CSI investigator inform me that was aspirated blood. Steve from True Crime Web.
I don't think anybody can say that yet. We can speculate, but look at this is what the droplets do. This is a picture of just a droplet dropping and how it spreads in this pattern.
Mhm.
And so the thing is, so I spoke with somebody too, and unless you have the a microscope, everything under a microscope and really look, I think all of us can make an educated guess, even a CSI. Tom, what do you think on that? Weigh in on that a little.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, I think at some point they stopped. Maybe they waited for the car to pull into a right position to get her in there. And the timing was just wrong and they had to stop for a second. I believe she was on blood thinners too. So she could have just had a small cut on her hand on somewhere that just bled a lot, while they were moving her from there. As far as the, what was in the backpack, it could have been, I said this once, it could have been like a sleeping bag to put her in a sleeping bag, put her over your shoulder and bring her out of the house. And then while they were doing that and sitting, waiting for the car to move up, whatever injury took place in that house is where that blood came from.
And I thought it was where maybe he reached back to pull the doors. He pauses there as he turns around with her. That's what I was sort of picturing. But I know what you're saying, Daniel. I've heard half and half probably on this topic, but I think everybody will agree unless they can actually see it under a microscope and see it better. I think it's hard to tell. In other words, is there any sputum in there? You would have all sorts of mucus and sputum if it's true that it was aspirated as opposed to just dripping.
Right. And that's what Steve was saying. He wasn't talking about the large drops. He said that was from somebody being there. He was talking about the cluster of smaller ones. That being, he thought was maybe 12 to 18 inches, maybe 2 feet off the ground and closer. Not necessarily the bigger drops. He thought that was from standing there or being held over there. But the small cluster of smaller drops is what he thought was either a cough or a sneeze.
Yeah. I think, none of us know for sure, but I think it's where a bunch of drops just like this one, it's just a drop, and you have 10 now, and then you have that spatter pattern. But it'll be interesting to find out, if we ever find out, what happened with that. Monica, any expertise that you've had in this area?
Well, we deal with a lot of blood spatter experts in, violent murder cases. And I can't tell that it's aspirated, but I do understand where Daniel's coming from, because you have the droplets and then you see that like kind of a little bit of a spray that would maybe indicate that. The issue with experts is that for every dollar the government spends on their expert, who's probably just a state doctor, we're going to spend about 2 on ours. So it turns out to be a bunch of who the jury likes more. And that's unfortunate, but I'm just trying to be, very truthful with, the panel and the people watching, is that, that's, it's a legal system. It's not really technically a justice system. So I don't get too in the weeds on what experts say immediately, because sometimes their position can be looked at through a different lens.
Philip, any thoughts on spatter versus expirated?
First of all, I think this is definitely a revenge killing. I do. I don't believe this ever started off as an abduction or a kidnap for ransom type situation. I really don't. First of all, he would know who the person is. And the last thing he's going to do is a Costco pharmacy run to keep her alive on all her meds until they can get the money together and return her to her loved ones. They're just not going to do that. Right. There was some type of prior dealing, some type of run-in, and it could have been fleeting and ephemeral. It could have been something as just, gnarling your upper lip. It could have been somebody just asking for a handout somewhere and her just turning him down, whatever. But when you look at the backpack, when the person initially goes in, it looks like it's obviously stuffed to the gills. I think one of the items in there was a blanket, and a sharp instrument. So I think he went in there, somehow got her down on that blanket, used some type of edged weapon to stick her, but couldn't leave her. And the reason why is he was afraid that she knew who he is. And if she survived, she could identify her captor. She could do that. So what does he do? He lays her down, he stabs her up, but then takes her with him to dispose of her somewhere along the way while making his exit. And in that process, you have droplets that made it onto those stones, if you will, that walkway near the front door. But I do believe that this started off as some type of vengeful act, and I don't know what it was for. In other words, to avenge some prior interaction, some prior dealing, and that all the instruments needed to carry out that final act were brought with him. But unfortunately, she left some blood behind, and it's a telltale sign that she was definitely injured. And on a personal level, I to this day think she is dearly departed.
Really, really quickly, Philip, I want to ask you this, because Philip's background, again, is as a public defender in Los Angeles, handling so many of these cases. Did you ever see a case that would be like that? I mean, I'm just wondering how you're making a lot of suppositions, but I know a lot of it comes from your experience. And so what other case, or what's making you have these very specific suppositions about knives and stab wounds and such?
In the district attorney's office, particularly here in Los Angeles, they have a family violence unit. All they do is go after offenders for harming people within the family. And that includes spouses, it includes boyfriends, girlfriends, people that you're dating. It is not uncommon for somebody who has been rebuffed or dumped to want to have the last word. And what do? They try to abduct the person that has rejected them and moved on to other people. And they bring all the accoutrement necessary to carry it out. And that includes a blanket, a knife, maybe some flex cuffs, whatever it is. And sometimes they do it with the intent of trying to reconcile. In their warped, sort of sinister way of dealing with the situation, they think that they can have a one-on-one rational discussion with the person that they're taking. And in the process, they leave behind droplets of blood. But usually the victim survives. And usually the offender has a conscience, they pull over, or the victim manages to get out of the car and they run for help. I've had several of those over the years involving domestic relations, not a ton, but several. And it is not uncommon for a victim to get injured during that tussle and during that melee to leave behind droplets. I've also had it where it was a pretty violent encounter in the property where you have cast off an actual high velocity blood spatter at the scene. This is different because it's more droplet style. So it tells me that she got injured without actually being or having blunt force trauma inflicted upon her. It looks as if it was like some type of a pricking or a sticking or a jabbing motion with a sharp instrument, to my eye anyway.
So let me ask this. just a show of hands from the panel really quick. How many of you think this was a burglary gone bad? Show of hands.
I can do either way.
Yeah, I agree with Dale. I don't think it was I don't think it was a burglary. I think it was something a little more than that. So that's why I'm like, yeah, let's a little more than just a burglary, but not just I'm going to go steal, something in the house and leave. No.
But real quick, so when I say a burglary, obviously burglary is just breaking and entering and going inside. But what I'm saying is, in other words, you think that this person did all of this to merely rob, and it went south. So Monica is saying that's her thoughts. Is that right?
I'm saying I can drink the Kool-Aid on all of these potential narratives.
Monica,
I mean, I'm like water, man. I'm real fluid. I can, the problem is that I don't want to be married to a position, and then because it could be any one of these things. I think the one thing that we all lose sight of is that if say there's a guy arrested tomorrow or a lady arrested tomorrow, whoever's involved is arrested tomorrow, and they dummy up and they don't say anything. Daniel knows this better. Daniel knows, Philip knows this better than any of us. That would be the perfect scenario, because we'd have all of these questions and no answers. And so would the government. But the problem is in these cases that I have found is that sometimes you leave with more questions than answers, because if the guy is arrested and based on what we just have now and whatever few leads, and he never gives you a narrative or an allocution or tells you what the plan was or what happens, you're just waiting. And that's a terrible spot for the Guthrie family to be in. That's a terrible spot for the nation to be in, that's been so invested in bringing, Ms. Guthrie back.
well, when you look at the Idaho 4 case, that's sort of what happened, right?
Exactly what happened. I mean, I'm not aware of Kohlberg ever. I mean, maybe he'll write a memoir, somebody will write a memoir and you'll find out. But that's the biggest hurdle, I think, in these situations. And that is sometimes we just never know. And that's a horrible spot to be in.
But I mean, just say he's arrested. So what your point is, if he's arrested and decides not to allocute and doesn't say a word, that we would never for sure know. Say he pleads guilty.
So you can prove,
Right.
So you prove through DNA or through this or through a co-defendant or other evidence that he's the guy that did it. Aha. But if he never testifies and he never does an allocution and he tells the cops to go pee up a rope, you have no idea what the plan was.
So so I think that is really an interesting point you make. Based on, though, everybody's experience. I mean, we have like 100-something years of experience up here.
Don't make us too old. Come on.
When you,
Hey, I'm officially old now. I'm on Social Security.
I'm older than everyone on this panel. It's terrible. Thank goodness for Miss Clairol. But basically, literally hundreds of years. Well, hundreds, 150. I don't know. It's too much. It's a lot to add. I bet it's 200 plus years of law enforcement / investigative experience up here. And from all those cases you worked and everything you saw, and now what you see here, I know it doesn't mimic any case because none of us have an 84-year-old. But having said that, there's something that you think on this case. Dale, let me start with you.
Okay, I'll say this. One, I hate speculation. I truly do. I hate trying to say, well, I know the bad guy had this intent. Because until you sit down and the guy confesses and tells you why, you're never going to know.
And even then, they're probably lying. They could be lying. That's the
They
problem.
absolutely could.
They never.
But then I look back on all of the different cases that I worked, all the different types of cases that I worked, and I know what makes sense to me and what does not. And I do know that home burglaries where a suspect knows that somebody is home is extremely rare.
Mhm.
And if they do that, the object of their desire is not the property in the house. They're going there to do violence to somebody in some way, shape, or form. And so that's why I believe that whoever, and the who is plural, did this, did so with the intent to do more than just break in there and take property.
Mhm.
And if I thought that their intent was just to commit a murder, well, why not just leave the body? Because it's
Exactly.
dangerous,
Right.
taking a body away, because you can get stopped because, oh, you crossed the lane of traffic, for just a second while you were looking back to see if your cargo's still secured, or, you forgot to dim your headlights. There's a whole lot of bad things that can happen if you've got a dead body in the car with you and you're driving from the location. One of the things I would want to know is, were Miss Guthrie's medications found at her home? Were any of those things taken? Were any of the things that she needed to sustain her life,
Mhm.
were they in the house, or were they removed by the person or persons who broke into the house?
I think Dale nailed it right on the head. And here's why. We still don't know 80 to 90% of anything.
Mhm.
If we got everything laid out to us of everything they have, everyone they talk to, every piece of evidence, we could probably all come up with a better idea of what might have happened. But being that we don't know anything about what was taken, what was disrupted, what was opened, what was anything. I mean, they didn't give up anything that was in that house. What was broke, a door, a camera, anything. So we could sit here all night and come up with experienced theories about what happened. But we, like Monica said, even if you get the guy or guys, we may never know.
Daniel, you touched on the fact that the search warrant mentioned medication, which would lead one to believe that the perpetrator or perpetrators took the medication. I mean, that says a lot to me.
Mhm.
I mean, that goes back to the whole kidnapping idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says a lot to me too. I mean, maybe that's why they thought maybe this was a targeted abduction from the get-go, was because of that. Again, if they go in there and it's not that, and something bad happens, and she ends up losing her life, there's no point in taking the body.
Exactly.
There's no point in, if she gets hurt and or if she's able to identify you or any of those things, why go back and take the medicine? That's not something that you think of in the moment. That is something that is thought of beforehand. And so if that was the case, then I think that would be a pretty big clue that the intention was to take her and to at least keep her alive for a little bit. Now, why? I don't know. Could it have been some sort of ransom? Could it have been a sexually motivated type of thing, a fantasy driven type of situation? Wanted to instill fear, wanted to maybe perhaps, kind of like with the Ronald Reagan scenario where he was, his attempted assassination was done by a guy who was trying to get the affection or attention of Jodie Foster. Did somebody try to be getting the attention of Savannah Guthrie by doing something like this? There's a lot of possibilities in this scenario, but all of them really, really, really mean something very nefarious.
Mhm.
I'd like to have a little hope to think if they went back to get her medication, the intent was not to kill her from the beginning. I mean, I try and hope that this wasn't a plan just to kill this poor woman.
Right. Or when they finally got her, Monica, she asked for it. Can you please get? I mean, we don't know the conversation that took place. Right. I need my medication or I'm going to die, and they don't want that. So maybe they ran back in, grabbed it, and brought it out.
Well, let me talk about or ask a question to everybody related to the case in Scottsdale. And this is a case that I have been talking about since the minute I found out about it, because I think it's very interesting that just about an hour and a half north, right in that neighborhood, in a very nice, again, well-to-do neighborhood, two high school students, like 17 and 16, drove 6.5 hours from California on January 31st at the direction of 8 and what was the other guy's name? Red.
Mm-hmm.
Through some, I mean, I think this is going to end up being a dark web thing, because I don't know how many on here have been on the dark web or haven't been on the dark web, but you can do anything. You can watch murders. You can watch, hire people to kill people. You can do anything. There's nothing barred. And I don't know what that's going to be for sure, but they were given $1,000. So that's going to be able to be traced, I would think, somehow. But I would have also thought those ransom notes by now would have been traced, and they haven't been, the emails. So anyway, they directed them to go to this house and to ask for 60 million in Bitcoin because these people were rich. These guys got uniforms, went into the house, tied up the individuals, beat them when they said that they couldn't. Anyway, a call was made, a police chase ensued, and they ended up being arrested. These idiot twerps. Obviously, I don't think obviously they didn't have anything to do with that. This is my question. When I first read that, and I guarantee the Bureau is on this because I would assign a lead to this minimally just to answer the question. What the heck? There's no kidnappings even in a category in and around these areas because they don't have them other than parental kidnappings. So what do you guys make of that, if anything? I mean, would this have been organized by some group that is literally facilitating these types of actions? I mean, to have two happen in the same region, I just thought was weird. Any thoughts? Let me start with Tom.
Dale's going to know this even a lot more than me with his homicide background. When you have a case and you're kind of, okay, what's going on here? Then you kind of get one theory. You're going to do checks in a large radius of any other crimes that look familiar to this. And I'm hoping they did that, and you're going to take a wide area because of just the travel that could be involved in this and just see if any home invasions, high-priced burglaries, any MOs that look the same, anything that is remotely similar to what you're looking at in front of you. I'm hoping that was done. But again, we weren't told if any of that was done. But like I said, Dale, I'm sure did that a million times with homicides he worked on.
Yes. There's resources out there where you can have your, I forget the title, but it's a person who does research for you, and they access VICAP and other things where they can try to find similar crimes to yours to see if they're possibly related. But that scenario that you described happening in, did you say it was in Scottsdale?
Scottsdale, just north of there, again, in a high-priced neighborhood. I'm going to bring up the pictures.
Yeah, to me, that's just crazy, especially if you can find a couple of teenagers who were contacted over the internet to do it. It's like, how did these people ever get together to come up with the plan?
Well, and they said
that's just wild.
For the plan. This is their car. This was the neighborhood. A neighbor caught this on his camera. But yeah, don't you think that's interesting? I think that is one of the most interesting things out there.
That's wild. But, when you mention vehicles, okay, this is going to sound weird, but when I was a junior officer, I was working with a senior guy in West Dallas. Not the town of West Dallas, but the western part of Dallas. And Jim Harris told me, if you see a white panel van, that in itself is probable cause. Because bad guys love white panel vans. And for those guys not to be driving a white panel van just shows that they're amateurs.
They were amateurs. What do you think about that, Daniel? What's your thoughts?
You know, in this scenario here, I think it's interesting. I think it's something that you need to look up and you need to look into. But when you look at the getup of this guy, and especially the latex gloves or the cloth gloves, I mean, unless he was contacted by somebody who just got lucky and contacted a guy that has experience in burglary, because not abduction aspect, but this guy screams experience in burglary, whether that's burglary into automobiles or homes. They just found the right guy who doesn't have DNA left in the CODIS system, if they have his DNA at all. I find it unlikely, but it is very interesting and an avenue that you definitely have to go down to make sure that it's not something similar, because there are some similarities here. Location, the Bitcoin thing, everything else. It's eerie.
Monica, thoughts?
I can go either way, but I also, it is intriguing to me. But then I think, what if it's this like really cruel copycat crime, and you got these two nitwits that buy into it and do it? I do think it's bizarre that it's so similar.
Theirs happened before. They went before.
Oh, well.
Yeah, well, basically the same time, almost. Yeah, pretty much the same time, the day before. It's just very interesting to me. I'm a statistics person in a sense. When you see that there's no kidnappings, and then all of a sudden, within about an hour and a half radius, you have a very not a kidnapping that's somewhat similar, but done by buffoons.
Mhm.
Seeking money, willing to break and enter, being told what to do by people on signal. I mean, they need to get down to who was directing these kids, because they were two people that didn't even know each other. And then they came upon this. Anyway, I found that just very, very interesting. What are your thoughts about the fact that this is, again, the picture of Porch Guy the day of the event? And then now the family talking about, and sources and everything else about the 11th. Let me start with you, Philip. What are your thoughts about, do you think they're different days?
No, I don't. And I think the reason why Porch Guy is covered up is for two reasons. Number one, he's trying to avoid detection by the home cameras. And number two, I don't know if the panel agrees, but I have a feeling that Nancy Guthrie knew her captor. I just have a feeling that she knows exactly who this person is or was. And by staying covered, she's going to wonder what's going on. Who are you? What's happening? And he may have unveiled his face when he got into the home, maybe just to be able to see. It could have been awkward just to get around. Who knows? I don't know if she's a pack rat or a hoarder. There could have been stuff everywhere. He needed to see better and had to take it off just so he didn't trip and fall over his feet or over her own belongings. But I think at some point he did take that hood off. And that's when I think the melee happened. And I'm convinced he had some type of tarp or blanket with him and some edged instrument. I think he cut her. I think he stabbed her. He could not leave her behind unless he knew she was dead, but he had no way of knowing how long it would take for her to die. And he couldn't just hang around, have a sandwich, and wait for her to die. So what did he do? He took her with him. And then at some point, she obviously expired, and he disposed of her. I'm convinced of it. I will be shocked if we all learn that she is still alive.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I'll be shocked. I will be absolutely shocked if she's still alive. But I love the fact that what Philip brings out, and that is, you don't cover everything. That tells me that she probably may know him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what those 40 minutes were inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's why I don't even think it was a kidnap for ransom, because let's assume that the family would have heeded the demands, come up with the cash or the Bitcoin or whatever the demand was, and they returned her. She's going to say, oh my God, you're not going to believe who that was. It was a guy that I gave a dirty look to one day when we were getting gas. Or it was a cashier at the local market who was upset that I didn't give him a tip in the tip jar. One of those types of jerks, you know? So he had to stay covered. He had to do whatever he could to avoid detection. I'm telling you, I'm convinced this was a revenge hit, and she knows who it was.
And you know, if that's the case, they spent all of, not a waste of time, but if you're spot on with that theory, then everything, you know, secondarily to who the daughter is and all that has just been kind of a red herring, like a big nothing burger. That it's
noise. I call it noise. That's all.
Right.
It is,
it's
really.
it's just noise that distracted from the real meat of the coconut.
Exactly.
I always say, tell. Tom's laughing at me.
That was a good one. I haven't heard that.
It's from Gilligan Island. I'm really dating myself.
I better write that down. Meat of the coconut.
Of the coconut. I took a mental note of that. Okay.
Meat of the coconut.
The one thing that I say often that's a little probably off-putting and off color, but I think the detectives and even you being a public defender will appreciate this. Tell somebody there's child porn on one of these phones, and my God, the feds will find everything. I mean, I get these wiped phones, and somehow the feds still find any no-no picture my client has ever looked at. So I'm always like, just tell the government there's child porn on the phone. They'll find everything they need.
Oh, yeah.
Only they had walkie-talkies.
Right. But you know, if they could just find grandma's phone, you know, and if you told them, you know, if they could find grandma's phone, then, you know, tell them there's child porn on it. They would solve this thing in 2 days.
Tom and Dale, if you guys will ring in next, do you think this was 2 different days? I'm going to show you again. This is the one picture that was released. Again, I pulled these right off of what Kash Patel put out. I don't have, you know, any special tools to enhance or anything. I just screenshotted these. So there's this one and there's this one. And you saw the recent statement where the Guthrie family said the 11th, the 31st, and the 1st. They specifically asked for the neighborhood to look at those dates. So now we've got the 11th more settled in as seemingly an important date, I think. What do you think, Dale?
It could be different days. It could be the same day, unless I'm looking at the device and the dates that it's showing that it captured the image. All I can do is go with whatever the person who's showing me the image says. And if they're saying that it's different dates, it's different dates.
Well, this is the thing. According to the sheriff, and I play this over and over again, he says there's no dates. There's no times because they didn't get this from the cloud. They didn't get this from a SIM card. They got this from somehow digging deep into the Google, you know, computer data banks and somehow retrieved these. And so and Daniel might know something about this, or you might, Tom, I don't know if anybody else knows about this, that's separate. Sort of your timestamps are separate from your imagery, and that's why they don't have it. So the sheriff's basically saying everybody's just guessing, but then why are they asking all about the 11th? Maybe they have other information.
The one thing I could never understand, and I still don't to this day, and it might answer the question of 2 different pictures or videos that we have. With the technology that's out there today, with every program you can imagine, why aren't these being enhanced in color? That we can see a color image of these images, because that could tell a lot with different days, different shoes, they're black and white grainy pictures. They all look the same. We've all seen them forever. When you make a color picture, he could be a different color glove, a different color sneaker, anything, you know, that could pinpoint that it's a day or 2 apart. but I never understood. It's so much easily identifiable when you have a color picture out there that's enhanced and the technology is there. I mean, it's not that difficult. And
right.
I never understood why we have never seen that.
Well,
Yeah,
to be
that's a good
clear,
point.
the Bureau would have done that. The Bureau's done that.
Right. Absolutely. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. No
And-
doubt about it.
And the stuff that's running around on the internet, I just don't trust. I mean, they've got eye color and all of this.
Right.
So I can't trust it, but I agree with you, Tom, and it had to be done. Sorry, Dale.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's a really good point, because we know that they can colorize old black and white movies, old
Mhm.
photographs that people have, and it does make a significant difference in what you see once it's been colorized.
I think it's highly likely that it has been colorized, but just not made public. It's
Exactly.
Very
part of the
true.
investigative file. Again, they're not going to go public with every new discovery, every new nugget, everything that they learned. They're just not going to do that. Otherwise, it could compromise the whole investigation.
My only point with that, Phil, and I agree with you. I mean, I've been involved in them, and Dale with holding on to certain things. But when you're out there asking and begging the public to help you, you have to provide information to the public to help you. And I don't think a color image of the perp is going to lead one way or another with a case, with bad or good. But if you're putting it out there for everyone to be on the lookout for, help us with this, that's because you're running into a little brick wall and you need the public's help. So provide them with the right information.
So piggybacking off of that, and I want to go around the horn with this, and I'll start with you, Daniel. Do you believe that law enforcement has any idea who this is, or do you think they're just running down leads right now, hoping for a break, waiting for the DNA?
Honestly, I mean, I think they're a little bit behind the eight ball. When it comes to the 11th and what you were mentioning, I think it's important to figure out what it is that law enforcement was doing around that time. And around that time was when they were getting Carlos, they were getting Daly. The 11th was a Sunday. I wouldn't be surprised if Daly was out, Saturday night partying, driving back home. Maybe perhaps his phone was in the area during that time and they're wanting to get some video from there because of these two guys. The fact is that since then, they've gone and talked to look at construction workers. They've kind of, in my opinion, started all over again. And I think that's a little bit of a concern. They haven't put out a year, make, or model of a vehicle like they did in the Brian Koberger case at this point, well before this point. And I think it's very concerning that they are waiting strictly on the DNA to come back. And the only other thing that I can think of is by not asking for the public's assistance is maybe they have more. But at this point, going back to almost square one, looking at the construction folks and vacant places in the neighborhood and all those other things is not usually an indication of them continuing where they're going, but starting over. And so I'm a little bit concerned at the very least.
What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think the beginning of this was so bad and run so horribly that they played catch up till today with what's out there and the crime scene, especially interviews that might have been disrupted because of how behind the eight ball, like Daniel said, this case was. I think it just got off to a horrible start. And when you start cases off horribly, it is very difficult to catch up.
Dale?
Oh, I agree. Tom, you may know this person. I took a course from Vernon Gebert.
Oh, yeah. I worked with his son.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
One of the very few schools that I was allowed to go to was basic homicide investigation taught by Vernon Gebert, who actually has a pretty good book on homicide investigations.
Very.
But one of the things all of his instructors and he stressed constantly is you get one good shot at that crime scene.
Yep.
One good shot at that crime scene. Make it count. Because if you have to go back, everything's tainted.
Right.
Nothing's good. And that's why when you were showing the images of the blood, I am so disappointed every time I see that image because I see garbage that should have been collected. I see the plants that should have been collected. I see the mat that should have been collected. And even though people can say, oh, well, we processed it at the scene, well, still, if you process it at the scene, what does it hurt taking it into custody, preserving it? So if you do have to go to trial and something does show up from some of the stuff that you got from the plants or the rug, you can say, this is what we got it from. Rather than, oh, here's an image of where we say that substance came from or that evidence came from. And one of the, and this is kind of sad, it's actually, or good, depending on how you look at it. One of the things that made me a much better detective than I would have turned out otherwise was having very good defense attorneys question me on the stand. And once that happened to me a couple of times, every time I went to a crime scene, I was constantly asking myself, if I'm on the stand, what would the defense attorney ask me about at this scene? What should I have collected? What should I not have collected? What can I be challenged on? And I always tried to address those things while I was at the original crime scene.
And just to, if I could for a second, Jen, piggyback on what Dale said, you know, when you show up to a crime scene, your trial prep starts as soon as you get there. You will start preparing for trial as soon as you get to that scene. And the most frustrating part of this, looking at it from a 30,000 foot elevation, you know, and on the other side of the country, but with the experience I've had, like Dale said, this was actually an easy crime scene to secure. It was easy. It was inside. So what do? You close the door. That's it. And you walk out and you get a car to go to the bottom of the hill. No cars come up here until we're ready. That's it. You're done. You're done. It's secure. And then to, you know, let it go later. And then like you get one shot. Dale was 1,000% right. You get one shot at a crime scene because like Monica and I were talking before we went on the air, there's defense attorneys right now who may one day defend whoever they may lock up, who are just sitting writing notes. That's it. They got a legal pad and they're just writing down everything that was wrong with this. And that's going to be their defense.
Yeah. Philip, your thoughts on that?
Well, this is just me. Obviously, we don't have a body. But even in a bodiless investigation, you can still convene a grand jury. And I just have a feeling that, I don't know if it's state, local, or federal, that they have a grand jury doing the investigation. The problem was the witnesses would not talk to local law enforcement out in the field. So in order to get whatever evidence or additional information they need for a successful or any prosecution, they need a grand jury. And what you do is you subpoena the ones who wouldn't talk into court. And that way, right there, you can ask them whatever you need to know under oath in front of the grand jury. And if they refuse to talk, they can be held in contempt. So it's possible that law enforcement and prosecuting agencies are waiting for grand jury testimony to help them beat the bushes, if you will, pound the pavement to bring some of these people in for an interrogation or for criminal prosecution. But I think that is the status right now, that there's more going on behind the scenes and not going public with it.
Just really quick before we get to Daniel and Monica on this, I don't think they're anywhere near ready for a grand jury at all. And as you guys know, the federal grand jury is just there. You don't have to call a special grand jury. It exists. On the state level, that can be different, but the federal grand juries are there for when the cases come up. And I get your point, Philip, and it's a very good one that I think a lot is going on back there. But we've seen what happens when they get a lead. HRT, SWAT, we're hitting it hard because they literally have a simple life on the line. We don't know that Nancy is deceased. And secondarily, you've got somebody capable of this out there. He's a bad guy.
Mhm.
So I just think that they're going to hit hard when it does happen, like they did in Koberger, like they've done in this case twice, because I think they're going to hit it hard with just starting with a criminal complaint for charges. Turkey, what do you got?
Well, my biggest concern about this picture right here is that it doesn't appear that this scene has been processed by the time that this picture was taken. If they did a fiber lift, there wouldn't be any plant residue, any flowers, or any of the greenery on the mat. And so they haven't even touched it at this point, in my opinion.
No, they did. I know exactly when this was taken. This is after. For everybody, just so you all know, this is literally days after the abduction. This is what the scene looked like. And that's why I brought this up. And another picture, he's literally standing on that dang mat. It's just, I can barely look at this and not get pissed off.
Yeah.
Got the plant matter that he could have had microfibers when he's pulling all of that, from his gloves, depending on if they're double layered, like you guys are saying, which I think is very possible. You got this saliva. You put anything in your mouth, you're salivating. He would have had to touch it to put it in and touch it to take it out. And right below him is this. And this is days after, Daniel. Days after.
That's horrible, because he had to step into a vehicle, I assume. And if he was wearing the shoes in his home, I mean, there's so many things that he could have gotten, that he could have tracked from his home to his car, from his car into the house, or onto that mat that he stepped on. And it's just something that's left. I mean, even if he doesn't, drop saliva or anything, his mouth is open, his mouth isn't covered. So he's breathing, open air breathing onto the door frame, onto the window there. And it's just beyond me that none of that was recovered or removed. The mistakes, and I know it's been brought up quite a bit, but I think that this case, I hate to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe better decisions would have been made sooner, that maybe it would have been solved by now. But I think that because of the mistakes that have been made, it's really going to hamper things. And even if they make an arrest, I hope they have some pretty hardcore evidence, because the amount of mistakes that they have made could lead to some craziness in the courtroom.
Monica, Philip, wouldn't you be salivating at this case? Yeah, just really quick, in case people don't know, because I didn't know, you didn't know that, Daniel, that was days later.
I didn't.
There were 4 searches. Does everyone know that? There was the 20-hour Pima County search. There was the FBI search, initial search. Then they realized, oh yeah, we forgot to go up on the roof because there's cameras up there. So then they went up and got those and took the car, which they didn't take on the first search. Then the FBI went back again and did the septic search. So 4 searches in this. I mean, Dale, what's your experience with that? I can't think of a time I ever went back. You have to get another search warrant. In this case, obviously they had consent, but
look, like I told you before, a lot of our physical evidence technicians and crime scene investigators did not like seeing me at crime scenes because I was known as a trash collector. I wanted everything picked up because it's better to have it than to not. And I just look at that front stoop, and it just astounds me that things were left and that they didn't do a thorough enough job the first time, where when they knew that they were leaving, that there was nothing left that could be done. The only thing that I would never have considered is doing the septic search. That's something that probably never would have crossed my mind. So cheers to those guys who thought of that. But if you have to go back to a crime scene multiple times, there was a lack of understanding of how to process a scene to begin with when you got there. And that's sad. That's, I'm not sure how much experience that sheriff's office has investigating serious crimes, but I know in Texas, for agencies that aren't used to investigating crimes of that magnitude, we have the Texas Rangers who have the experience that would go out there, and I'm sure that Arizona has something similar. And I would kind of wonder why those people weren't called in, at least at the initial crime scene, to help process it.
I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'd like to have Daniel ask one more question, and then I've got another question, and then we'll wrap. Daniel?
Yeah, my last question is, I know this has gone on for about 50 days now at this point. I know some people have concerns of this going cold. I believe the sheriff had mentioned even years to solve this. I think that was this one. At what point, I mean, if we already passed that point, but at one point do you really start to get concerned that this is going to get cold?
It's already cold. I mean, in my mind, it already is, because there's nothing going on that we know of. And I just think at this point it already is. And that's the sad thing. And it may be a while, especially if the perps are not from that area and are mobile and could just go wherever. They may not even be in this country anymore. And that's the tough part of this. And listen, any case, especially a case like this, Dale will echo this. Time is not on your side. It's just not. If you don't get a viable lead in a certain amount of time, it's very hard. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Tom, can I just add something? When we watch shows that are based on real life homicide investigations, they're called like First 48.
Yeah.
Not first 8 months.
For a reason, right?
And my position is I've only been the lead investigator for the defense on 50 capital murder cases. That's not to include all the other horrible things that human beings do. I've never been in a situation where anybody, the government or the defense, has gone, oh shit, we collected too much evidence. We shouldn't even have got that toothbrush. So to what Dale was saying, when you went in, you didn't know it was a kidnapping immediately. Right. It could have been a homicide from the first moment she was missing, or she wandered off. But why wouldn't you collect everything? Like, what does it hurt to bag and tag and collect everything and inventory? And here's the thing, the car, if she's got Apple CarPlay, if they turn the car on, they can plug this stupid thing in and it's going to show her last text messages. Mm-hmm. So there's so much data that could have been collected from the car and just all of these other things. And I think we're too far down the road now to go back. And when you go back, that's when the defense goes, oh, well, you didn't know what you were doing on the first 4 months. And then you had 100%. To go back. And then you just tunnel visioned and focused in on my guy after all of this time. And it provides reasonable doubt.
Right. And you nailed it. And one more thing, I'll just say experience. I said it before. Experience is everything. And I think the problem with this case was my ball, my game, we'll take care of it.
I do think there's a little bit of a territorial thing. Sometimes locals, especially sheriffs, get their feelings hurt when the big guys, the feds, come in, and then everybody wants to be, who's in charge. Yep. And sometimes you just have to admit that this may be out of your depth. You may have some new guys that have just moved up into violent crimes that off the road. This may be a little outside their expertise, and sometimes you have to hand it over. And sometimes being the bigger person is saying, I'm out of my depth. This may be too much for our department. Right. And I think they missed that here, unfortunately.
Philip, and then I'll end with 48 Hours star Dale.
I think for purposes of a kidnap, it's cold, because I think we can all agree that Nancy is dearly departed. I mean, even when we look to history, the Lindbergh kidnapping, the baby, back in, I think it was March of 1931 or 32, the ransom note went out the same night that the baby was abducted. Right. So I think we can all agree, you don't wait around a week, 2 weeks to decide whether or not you want ransom. It's something that you release immediately to try to get the cash or whatever thing of value that you want or need immediately. So the question now becomes, for purposes of criminal prosecution, is it cold? No. I cannot tell you how many homicides or even non-homicides I've worked on where it could take months to crack the case. This is why, particularly in murder, there's no statute of limitations. It can take years to finally solve a murder and figure out who did it and how you're going to prove it. So in my opinion, for purposes of prosecution, there's no good rush. Okay. Now, for purposes of a kidnap, if you believe she's alive, then yes, they should utilize all resources to do what they can to find her and bring her home to her loved ones. But I think we can all agree that it is likely too late. But it has not gotten cold for prosecution purposes. It's far too soon.
I agree. There is no statute of limitations on murder, and it's more important to get it right. And that's why a lot of times they don't charge the person right away. But if you're lacking the evidence to not even have somebody to charge, it doesn't really matter.
Dale, 48. And you didn't even know that, Monica, but Dale has been.
I did not know that. But he gets what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dale.
I'll say this. Tom is right. The further away you get from the actual date of the offense, the harder it is to solve. And I have solved some cases years after they were committed. But then you are relying on what I call God moments, where God intervenes and puts a witness or some stray piece of evidence into your lap, and it can be processed and identify a bad guy. But those are extremely rare. They do happen, but they're rare. And the further out we go from this, it is just going to be just that much harder to solve. And it's even going to be harder to prove because of what I perceive to be early errors in processing the crime scene.
Yeah.
So
I've got one last question, and well, two, but one is going to be a yes or no. So we're just going to go around because everybody loves to speculate here and guess and everything. I'm going to force you. But I wanted to ask if any of you are familiar with the Nancy Woodrum case. And there's a lot of questions, kind of parallels that I don't think are parallels, but I guess I shouldn't have said that. I should just give you the facts. The facts are she had a construction worker working at her house. He comes in and he sexually assaults her, takes her to another location and kills her. That's my understanding. It's possible he killed her and then took her, but my understanding was he actually took her someplace else and then killed her. The body was found, and people are trying to make parallels. Actually, she wasn't even in her 80s. She was much younger than that. I want to say in her 60s. But nevertheless, people are trying to make comparisons, I think, to that. I don't see that as comparable because she knew him and he wasn't masked, so he had to kill her or else she could finger him on it. But it's kind of to the point of Phillips that could be kind of the situation. Do you guys know about the case? And it's so I was just curious as to your parallels. No one knows who it is. Okay, I'll forget that case. Then let me go to my final question. And this is a yes or no. Do you think this case will be solved, Philip?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Monica?
Yes.
Turkey?
Eventually.
Dale?
this is a firm. I have no clue whether it will be or not.
Oh my God. Because how many cases did you work that you didn't solve?
Well, cases that were assigned to me or cases that I assisted with, because the numbers go up drastically. I had about 85 cases that were assigned to me specifically, and I solved 82% of them.
Wow.
Is so the one that how we met, that one is in your.
Well, that's still an unexplained. That's still an unexplained. I had because of the circumstances that he was found under, he could have done that to himself, or he could have had help in doing that. Do I believe he had help in doing that? Yes. But one of the things that complicated that case, and to this day, I get angry every time I think about it, is the detective that was at the scene with my sergeant, who, while I was outside of the room where the body was found, talking to a family member of the deceased, that detective and my supervisor allowed the person who, turned out to be the suspect into the room and to grab the stool that was a key piece of evidence that did not belong in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And so any fingerprints or DNA on that stool that didn't belong in that room were compromised because, our suspect touched it at their direction.
Yeah. That the only good thing about that case is it brought us together, Dale.
It did. I got to drive around Dallas with you for a few days.
That's right. It was great.
And the only thing you got out of that was a pink hat.
I did get a pink homicide hat. It's really cool. Homicide hat. Hey, listen, I just really want to thank everybody. I know Mac did not make it. She was doing her darndest. She said she thought she'd be able to make it, but she was flying and her flight was delayed. And I can just picture her sitting on the tarmac going, so she's great. But anyway, I just can't thank you guys enough. I know this was a lot of your Sunday evening here. Thank you to the mods and thank you to everybody on the channel. It's good to get a couple 100 years of experience here with these kinds of cases and investigations generally. So thank you all. And I look forward to having you guys back again.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
so much.
See ya.
Thank you.
Nice meeting everybody.
me. Bye, guys.
Nice to meet everyone.
Sorry, slow remover here. There's a lot of people to remove. Okay, there we go. Whoo, this light is bright. Everybody, thank you so much. I think they were great. There's so many questions about this case. We'd like to come forward and say, hey, we've got some great source that's telling us X, Y, Z. We don't have that. What we do here is professionally and without drama, we cuss and discuss crime. And I hope this was beneficial or educational in some way to all of you to at least help you as you muddle your way through it. I always say none of us on this panel that we're on this panel tonight will ever likely serve on a jury because we will be discarded by one side or the other in a hot minute. You guys would be on the jury. So as this case develops, I'm going to keep bringing it to you and going to keep having an amazing guest like we had tonight with all their years of experience. It's really amazing to cut up cases like this with guys like this because they have different views. Not everybody agreed on motive. Not everybody agreed on several things, but they had the reasons. And there was no one on this panel that doesn't have homicide experience, that doesn't have experience working cases like this, that was answering questions. So I really appreciate y'all. Thank you for spending your Sunday with us. And until next time, may justice be served for Nancy Guthrie and for all the missing.